Hi, my name is Arthur, and this is my colleague Issy. And today we're going to be talking about capturing data easily and efficiently on the go using ArcGIS mobile apps. So I want to start by talking a bit about the role of mobile apps within ArcGIS, and then we'll show a bit about how this works in practice. So with ArcGIS mobile apps, you can take your data with you wherever you go. You can view, edit, and collect data on a mobile device, even when you're working offline. And the mobile apps are integrated very tightly with the rest of the ArcGIS system. So when you sign into a mobile app using a compatible user type with your ArcGIS Online portal user, you immediately have access to the same organizational data that other users can access through web maps and apps in the rest of the ArcGIS system. And it works both ways. When you collect new data or edit data in the mobile apps, this data will automatically be updated in your organization and be visible to other users in your organization through their own maps and apps. Of course, if you're working offline, this process isn't immediate, but you can always synchronize your changes from your mobile device with the rest of your organization as soon as you're back online. As an optional extra, the ArcGIS mobile apps can also be configured to keep track of the location of your device, even when you're not actively collecting data. And this can be used in a couple of ways. We can enable location-based alerts using geofencing that will notify the device when you enter or exit a specific area. And you can also configure the device to keep track of the location at regular intervals, and then these location tracks can be securely shared with other users in your organization through location sharing. Each of the apps within ArcGIS is actually two components. There's the mobile apps themselves, of course, and these can be downloaded from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store on any supported device, phone or tablet. But each of the mobile apps also comes with a companion web app, and these act as the designer. So this follows a similar kind of ethos to some of the other app builders in ArcGIS, like Instant Apps, Experience Builder, Dashboards, in that the mobile apps are effectively made up of a set of building blocks that you can slot together in whatever way best suits your needs. And so without an ounce of app development expertise or any coding knowledge necessary, you can build up the perfect app interface for your mobile workers that gives them everything they need right at their fingertips. Now, you might have been noticing that I've been referring to apps plural, and that's because there are indeed several of them. For the rest of this session, we're going to be talking about these main three core apps that are included with the ArcGIS mobile worker and above user types. So these three, Survey123, QuickCapture, and Field Maps that we'll be focusing on. Now, you might be wondering, why are there three of them? Why don't we just do everything with one app? And that's what we want to try and get across to you today. We want to show how each of these apps has its own specific niche, and how leaning into each app's kind of specialisms and strengths can help make your field data collection efficient and effective. So although each of the apps is very highly configurable to suit your own needs, I think if you follow these kind of rules, this will help you get the most out of the apps for the least amount of effort. So I would always recommend you start with the app that best suits your particular use case, and then start simple. You can get a long way by just making a few simple tweaks. And that's kind of the ethos that we're going to be following for the practical part of this session. And so that brings me nicely on to talking about that practical part of the session. We're going to spend the rest of the session, or most of it, talking through each of the apps and showcasing them in a particular use case that plays into their particular strengths. So with that said, welcome to the London Borough of Londonborough. The London Borough of Londonborough is facing some particular challenges keeping their roads clean and well maintained. They're receiving a lot of complaints from members of the public on issues like litter and unkempt vegetation and random road signs in the middle of the street. I'm sure you get the picture. And they want to target an initiative that will help clean up their streets and improve the efficiency of their maintenance operations using the ArcGIS mobile apps. Now, you might be able to tell from the name, but the London Borough of Londonborough isn't a real place, and the London Borough of Londonborough Borough Council isn't a real local authority. This is just a fictional device that allows us to showcase each of the apps in a workflow that plays into their strengths. We might show some real-world locations as part of some of these demos, but that's purely because apparently constructing an entire new London borough for the purposes of these demos would have been a bit too expensive. So this is the workflow that we're going to demonstrate. The London Borough of Londonborough Borough Council is going to start out by collaborating with members of the public to report on issues. using ArcGIS Survey123. We're then going to take that data, run some analysis maybe in the background, and then we're going to target some priority areas, and then we're going to send the field teams out using ArcGIS QuickCapture into those priority areas to do an on-site appraisal and capture issues in more detail. We're then going to feed that information into ArcGIS Field Maps, and then we're going to use Field Maps to actually carry out the work and monitor the status of our maintenance operations using some exciting upcoming functionality that I'll talk more about later. So now I'll hand over to Issy to talk about Survey123.
Thanks, Arthur. So Survey123 is the public data collection app in our workflow. So throughout these demos, you'll see that each app collects similar types of data, but each with different strengths, and those strengths are what we want to focus on today. So as Arthur spoke about, we're wanting to create a workflow where issues can be reported to local councils and resolved through the mobile apps. So we're going to use Survey123 to create a survey that can be accessed by the public and used to report a number of different issues. So the users can report their location and a picture of the issue. So much like a lot of our app builders, the Survey123 web designer is an easy-to-use drag-and-drop interface. So there's no training needed to start creating your surveys. So with that being said, let's jump over to the web designer and start building our survey. So as you can see, we're given a couple options for creating our survey, including starting from one of the pre-made templates or using Survey123 Connect. For now, I'm going to start from a blank survey, but I'm going to come back to the Connect option later. Now, to make a start on this, I'm going to utilize the Survey123 AI Assistant. This is in beta at the moment, but it can still be enabled in your organization through your settings. So to access Survey123 Assistant, we'll just use this button over there. So I'm going to ask the assistant to create a survey for the public to report on issues in their local area. You'll see it'll immediately start generating some survey questions to go along with my prompt. Now, being AI, this response is going to look a little different every time we run it, so it might take a few attempts to get the right prompt. Just don't get angry at it. It's trying its best. So this is a great start, but I think we want to just remove a couple questions, so I'm just going to ask it to do that. And then it's just going to redo that survey, and then in, 30 seconds, our survey is ready to be created. So once that's been generated, we could keep this how it is, but I think I want to make some simple edits to this to ensure we get all the information we need from the public. So as an example, I've realized that we don't have a date question. So I'm going to drag the date question over. We can add a label. I'm going to choose to automatically collect the submitting date and time, and then I'll turn off visibility for that question. Now, through the web designer, we can create questions with conditional visibility. So as an example, we can add extra questions to narrow down our issue. So I'm going to add a question for what type of road issue are we reporting on? I'll add a couple options, so potholes, flooding, traffic issues, and I'll let them select other as well. We can then add a rule for the visibility so that that question only appears if the road damage question is selected. I'll likely do this for all of the issues, but I'll do that behind the scenes, or that would be extremely boring. Now, we can set up our survey to pull data from other layers that have been publicly shared to ArcGIS Online, or that have been shared to the Living Atlas. For example, I'm going to add a field that's automatically populated with the district that the issue is being reported in. So to do this, let's add a district question, and we'll just give that a label for the district. And I'm going to set this up to calculate the output using the local authorities district layer from the Living Atlas. So I just saved that over in my favorites. And then I can set up a rule for this so that the district is pulled from the location. And we're going to set this as read-only so that no one is able to edit this question. So once I'm happy with that, we can save it and go ahead and publish our survey. And once that's published, we'll jump over to the Collaborate tab. to firstly check that our survey is shared with the public, but also make sure that only members of my organization can actually access this survey. So let's take a look at the survey from a member of the public's point of view. So they've just scanned a QR code and they want to report on one of the issues. So here we can see they can pick one of the issues and we'll see that conditional visibility in action. They can then provide a little description of the issue. So in this case, there's a horrible road sign in their way. They can use the map to indicate where the issue is, or if they were in the field, they could use their mobile to use their current location. And you'll see that district is automatically populated. They can then also pick a photo of the issue. Now, just a reminder, this is a fake issue. I know the district there says Islington. This is nothing against Islington. I'm sure there's no issues. It is Islington. So now we've seen how to create our survey. Let's take this up a level and see some of the cool features of Survey123 that we could use to improve our survey experience. Now, earlier I mentioned Survey123 Connect. This is the desktop version of the web designer and uses XLS forms to create surveys. Now, if you're just starting out with Connect, I can understand that this looks a little intimidating at first with the Excel form. It almost feels like you're given a little too much creative freedom. This is why we recommend that you create your survey in the web designer first, and then when you're ready, bring it into Connect to add some more features. This is also really useful if you're just starting out, as you can see how those questions you set up in the Connect form, in the web survey, will be set up in the Connect form. It's worth noting, though, when you bring your web design surveys into Connect, there's then no going back. You won't be able to design your surveys in the web designer anymore. So just keep that in mind, or if you're just testing it out, maybe create a copy of your survey first. So if you take a look on the screen here, I brought this survey in that we just created, and we can see how all those questions we set up behind the scenes would be set up on the form on the right. So any changes you make to your form will be updated in the survey to the left. So you can test out any changes as you go. Using Survey123 Connect, we can set up more advanced functionality, such as adding repeats. So these are great for capturing multiple entries in one response. So in this example, it might be nice to allow the public to report on multiple issues at once in multiple different locations, all within one survey. So that means they only need to submit their personal information the one time. So one functionality that is only available to set up in Connect is the Smart Assistants. So these assistants can be configured with image questions in your survey and can be configured to classify objects, add annotations, and redact unwanted information. These assistants use object detection or machine classification models from either the Living Atlas, built-in APIs, or that you've trained yourself. You can upload the model to Survey123 Connect, and then they'd then be able to be used online and offline through the image questions in your survey. So you'll see an example of one of these on the screen here. So this is the Smart Attribute Assistant. I've used the Common Object Detection model from the Living Atlas, and the assistant has been configured to display real-time annotations on the images being captured, and it will then store those attributes in the image metadata so that it can be populated for other questions in our survey. So that's just the start of what you can do with Survey123 Connect. If you want to find out more about the app, we've got some really useful resources like the Survey123 Web or Connect blog that I recommend you take a look through. But for now, enough about Survey123. Let's take a look at the next step in our issue reporting by looking at how QuickCapture can assist us with rapid data collection. Still me. So, QuickCapture is a part of the field response in our workflow. Much like Survey123, it collects location-based data, but where Survey123 is about forms and structure, QuickCapture is about speed and simplicity. It's designed for people on the move who need to collect data fast, capturing the key information in just a couple clicks. QuickCapture supports collecting points, lines, and polygons, and can even record multiple features at once. It's ideal for use on the go, for example, from a moving vehicle, in the passenger seat, of course. to report issues in real time. Setting up a QuickCapture project is just as quick as using it. You can customize the buttons, link them to layers, and even build in logic with Arcade, all through a clean visual interface. So let's take a look at how we can do this. So much like with Survey123, we're given the option to start with one of our pre-made templates, which, if you're just starting out with QuickCapture, is such a good way to get a better understanding of the app and also help with design ideas. For our workflow, I'm going to start from an existing layer, as I have this local issues layer, which contains a field with each of the issues we're going to be reporting on. QuickCapture will be able to use that field to design all the buttons in our app. Now, we're going to be using an example QuickCapture application to be used by our team in the field to report on those issues being reported by the Survey123 form. The job of this particular team is to, firstly, check if the issues are still present. Secondly, if they're easy, perhaps they can resolve them. But thirdly, and more likely, create an updated report of the issues so that it can be worked on in our Field Maps application next. So now that this is loaded up, you'll see that each of those buttons has been created for me. Depending on how much more information you want your field workers to collect, there isn't much more we need to do to our app to create a fully functioning application. But I do want to change the look of this, though, to make it a little prettier and a lot easier to use. So here is one I made earlier. You'll see I've made the buttons bigger, and I've just added some icons, and then I've also grouped them together to make them as easy as possible to locate. If we wanted to add a new issue to report on, we could just use these buttons at the top here. So we could drag one down, and I'm going to create a new button for a construction issue. So we'll just give that a label, and then we can configure it like all of our other buttons. So that includes adding one of the freely available symbols, so I'm just going to add the cone symbol once we can find it. Perfect. So we can then move on to configuring what options the user is presented with when they click on these buttons. So if you take a look over to the right, you'll see that we can set whether a map appears once they've reported an issue. So this is just to ensure that the location is as accurate as possible. We can also prompt the user to take a photo of the issue. I'm going to let them take multiple photos just so we have as much information for the field team as possible. We can then configure any information we want the user to collect along with those images. So at the bottom here, you'll see we have all of the fields for the layer, and we've got a few options for how our data could be collected. So there's two different types of user input options. As an example, we've used the button user input option for the status field. So the options for this field are being pulled from the list of coded domains set up at the layer level. We could also set up a project user input. So this is the dialog that is shown when the project is opened, and the value selected is carried through to every issue captured in that instance. The project user input is where we could use a dynamic choice list. So this is new to QuickCapture. So where your choice lists originally could only be manually created or pulled from the field's coded domains, they can now be automatically populated from either a feature service or a table. So these choices persist even if your project is taken offline and allow your users to have the most up-to-date information. So along with our user inputs, we could also set the app to automatically collect information from the user's device. So here I've set the app to automatically calculate the date and time of collection, and then also collect the worker's full name and their email address, without the worker having to input anything. If we wanted, we could also turn on location sharing, so that the worker's location is logged at regular time intervals. So now I'm happy with my application, we can just go ahead and save it, and then we can edit the sharing settings. I've decided to just share my app to my organization, but if we wanted, we could share it to a group, or if our organization was licensed with ArcGIS Hub Premium, we could share it publicly. So let's take a look at the data collection out in the field. So this is what our app looks like on the mobile. We can go ahead and report on a traffic sign issue just by clicking that traffic sign button. And then we'll just take a picture of an issue, and then we can collect any of the information that we've set up with those button user inputs. And then any other information, so like our full name or our email, is all being captured behind the scenes, so I don't need to input that information. So that was the basics of creating and using a QuickCapture application. As I mentioned, a very quick process. Now, I wanted to show you how quick you can set that application up, but there are quite a few options available if you did want to take it out further and make it smarter. For example, we could have added some additional questions or fields that calculate values automatically using arcade expressions. So in this example on the screen here, much like we did with the Survey123 app, we're using Arcade to automatically calculate the district that the issue is being reported in. So that's pulling the data from that district layer that we used in our Survey123 app. Another great feature to be aware of is oriented imagery. So this allows you to capture and view photos with directional context. So not only do you see where a photo was taken, but also in which direction the camera was facing. You can then enable oriented imagery for your QuickCapture project, and this will cause your app to automatically calculate the necessary photo metadata without any changes to the user experience. So now that our QuickCapture team has logged and reported those issues, we want to get them fixed. So I'm going to pass over to Arthur to tell us more about field maps.
Thanks, Issy. So yeah, once our QuickCapture team has done their thing, we want to take that data and we want to use it to task our mobile workers to actually go and fix the issues in the field. And for this, we're going to use ArcGIS Field Maps. Why are we using Field Maps for this? Well, there's several reasons that make Field Maps a good choice. Firstly, because Field Maps uses our existing organization's maps and data, we can make sure that our field workers in the field have everything that they need, all of the information that they need to carry out their task effectively. As I'll show a little bit later, we can also configure some rules and logic within field maps that mean that we always capture high-quality data with the least amount of effort, and this is excellent for editing business data on the go. We can also set up location-based alerts using geofencing in field maps, and this makes sure that things happen in the right place. But probably finally and most importantly, coming later this year for a planned release, the new tasks capability in field maps will allow us to manage guided workflows and manage our work orders directly within the field maps app itself without having to switch to another application or another work order management system. So this is really handy for helping enable our field workers to work as efficiently as possible and to make sure that all of the actions are completed correctly when they're out in the field. So I'm going to talk a bit more about how tasks are set up. First, I just wanted a quick mention. If you want to access the Field Maps Designer, it's accessed from the waffle menu in the top corner of your ArcGIS Online interface or portal interface. And there's also an Open in Field Maps Designer button from the item details page of your web map. The waffle menu, by the way, is also where you access the app builders for all of the other applications in ArcGIS. So here we are in the Field Maps Designer, and here I've created a simple web map and opened it up in the Designer. And this just contains two layers at the moment. So the first layer here, this local issues layer, this is the same layer that we were using in QuickCapture. I've just given it a different name. And this is our editable layer containing the issues that we want to actually act on. There's then a second layer here, and this is providing some context. So this layer contains information on which land is owned by the council. And this is actually a premium data set called Title Info that's available from the ArcGIS Marketplace that contains enriched land registry data. And here we're using it to provide a bit of extra context for our mobile workers. So here I am in the early access version of the Field Maps Designer. And all I've done to enable tasks for my layer, I've clicked on the layer, I've clicked on tasks, and I've clicked the enable tasks button. And that's already created a set of defined of layouts, each with their own defined actions. And these layouts are then shown to the user at various stages during the process of completing their task. And these are tied to the different values of the status field. And we can change these values if we like to. So if we come over to task settings here, and open up this status option here. This is the coded value domain that shows all of our different available status actions, and we can add in our own statuses to suit our own particular workflow if we want to. But I think this gives us a good starting point to work from. configuring the actions that are available within each of these layouts is very straightforward. We can just click on the layout that we want to edit, and then let's say we wanted to tidy this one up a little bit and clean up the experience. We can just remove any unnecessary actions using these delete icons. If I come over to the in progress layout, this is the one that's got the most stuff going on because this is the one that's active while the work is actually being completed. And here we can, again, just using simple drag and drop, we can reorder things to change the order that they are displayed in the app. We can remove things to streamline the experience a bit. Here we've got a group, so we can group things together. And we can also reorder things and remove things in the group. So maybe let's take out a few of these options just to control the types of files that users can upload as attachments to this action. And we can also add in our own actions as well. So here on the list on the right-hand side, these are all of the available actions that we can add to our layout. In this case, we want the edit form action here. So we can just drag that in and move it to the top so that it goes earlier in our workflow. This edit form action is just a quick button to open up the web form for editing the actual attributes of our layer. And so let's have a look at that now. So I'll make sure to save those changes. And then if I come over to the form tab, this is where we set up our web form. And this is one of the great things about Field Maps, is it uses the same web form that's also used across Map Viewer and also the edit widgets in apps like Instant Apps and Experience Builder. So we can configure this form once and then have the same editing experience no matter which app we're using, which is very nice. And here you can see once we enabled tasks, it's automatically populated some of these task-related fields into our form. We can come in here, maybe we don't want the user to actually edit these fields themselves in the web form, so we can just uncheck these editable and required options for all of these fields. And this basically means that the field will be displayed for users to see as extra context, but they won't actually be able to edit any of the values. So we'll just do that for all of these. And similar to the action, this is all just a simple drag and drop interface. So if we scroll down on the right-hand side, we can see all of the fields that are contained within our data, and we can just drag these into the form. So maybe we want our actions taken, and then maybe a time taken, and materials cost estimate, and then total cost estimate, maybe. And so, yeah, we can just reorder the form and structure it however we like this. I think this is a good place to start, but there's ways we can take it further. And I think rather than setting it all up in front of you, I'll just do the classic, here's one I made earlier. So here we go. Here's a more complete web form. All I've done here at the start is I've grouped together all of these task-related fields into a group. So I've just dragged a group layout item here and then dragged my questions into that group to create this task summary group. And then I've turned off this expand initial state, and that means that this group of fields will be collapsed by default. And this just means that if users don't need to see it, they can just scroll past it much more easily. Down here, we've done some of that arcade scripting that I mentioned previously, and is it mentioned for QuickCapture? So here, you can see this question has this visible option, and this means we've got an expression controlling the visibility of this field, similar to how we set up in Survey123. So all I need to do to enable this is I come next to this visible check mark and I click this little cog. I can add an expression here. And if I edit that expression, you can see you get, similar to in Survey123, we get this nice little expression builder. So here I've set the field to only show up when the type of task is pothole. And here over on the right-hand side, you can see it's built a little arcade expression for us. So no scripting knowledge necessary to use this functionality. You can just use this expression builders if you like. But if you do want to dive into more depth, you can always launch this arcade editor, and you have then full control to script how you want this option to be configured. And you can do exactly the same kind of expression for the visibility, whether or not a field is required for data entry, and also whether or not a field is editable. And this gives you a lot of control for controlling the editing experience in your web form. You can also use expressions to automatically calculate values. And so that's what I've done for this total cost estimate field. Here I've set it to read only so that users can't manually enter a value. But I've also set the value to be automatically calculated from our other fields. And to do that, I've just come down into calculated expression, clicked on the cog, added an expression. And here we bring up the full arcade editor. You can see I've just added a very simple mathematical expression in here. Nothing too complicated. We're just multiplying our time taken by a fixed cost per hour, and then we're adding our materials cost. Very simple. If you're wondering how I got to these field names here, all I did was came over to the right-hand side here, and under profile variables, under feature, you can see all of the available fields in our data, and you can just click these to immediately add them to the script. So very handy. We can also use similar kind of logic to control the tasks workflow as well. So if I come over to tasks, open up the task settings, here you can see I've set up a filter, custom filter, and this will just filter out tasks that are relevant to our road maintenance team. And so all I've done here is I've come over to the type, and I've made a note. This is the same coded value domain that we were using in QuickCapture for the type of issue. And I've just made a note of the types of issue that might be relevant to our road maintenance teams. In this case, codes 1 and 3 for potholes and traffic sign issues, probably of particular interest. So I've made a note of those values, and then we can configure our filter to filter out just those values. So here, this is actually a SQL expression rather than Arcade. But in the similar sort of simple expression here, we're using the type field, and we're saying we want a value that's in this list, and the list just contains the values 1 and 3, which is our pothole and traffic sign issues. And then we're saying, and we want the status to be 0, and 0 is the code for our unassigned tasks. So we can set up any kind of custom filter logic that we want to make sure that users can navigate to the tasks that are relevant to them when they're in the app. One more thing I want to show here while we're in the Field Maps Designer, and that's the geofence capability. So this is utilizing similar capability to the location sharing. And here we can basically add a geofence, and we can set this up to send a notification to the device when a user enters or exits a specific area. So let's call this council land, and then we can select our council land layer that we've got for context. And then here we can add a message on enter and on exit. So I can say like entering council land. It's very basic. You can put in any information you want here, including field values. And then here we can choose a type. So in this case, we're going to be using a location alert, but we can also, and this is a unique capability to Field Maps, we can also configure location sharing to be constrained to our geofencing. And so that means that the location of the device is only shared once the user enters that area, and that's a great tool for maintaining the privacy of our users. So there we go, we can just save those changes. Now let's have a look at how that works in the field. So here I've opened the same map in the Field Maps mobile application. And you can see now there's a list of tasks available at the bottom of the screen that we can bring up. And then we can use that filter that we configured to filter down to just the tasks that are relevant to the road maintenance team. So once we click this, we'll see, or tap this, we'll basically be able to see just the relevant issues. And then we can select one of these to view its details. So if I tap on this traffic sign issue, this is the same one that we captured in QuickCapture earlier. And you can see that those field values that are populated in QuickCapture are visible here. Related to our tasks, and then we can use the action then to pick up the task if we want to. And here you can see the layouts change now, and the assignee and status have automatically updated, so no need to enter those values manually, which is a nice speed up. We can also access attachments, so here we can access the same image that was captured in QuickCapture in our Field Maps app for extra context. Once we're happy and we've navigated to the site, we can then use the start action to actually start work. And here we can see the layouts changed again, and so now we've got some more options, like the ability to attach a photo, the button to edit the web form, and also some more options that don't fit on the screen under this More menu. So if you click on this edit action, it then takes us to the edit form, the web form that we configured. So here you can see the collapsed task summary group that contains all of the read-only information about our task, just for context. And then also underneath that is then all of the fields that we dragged into our form earlier. So here we can enter the actions taken once we've completed the work. And then we can enter an estimate for the time. And then once we do that, using that calculated expression, it's automatically calculated the total cost estimate just by multiplying that by the fixed cost that we set up in our expression. And just to show the conditional visibility working as well, here we've selected a pothole issue instead, and you can see now we can see our materials cost field, and when we enter values in there, they're also taken into account in that total cost estimate. And also the geofencing. So we set up geofencing to set up an alert here. So you can see once they exit council land, it notifies them. Here they're working on an area of path, and part of it is inside council land and part of it is outside. And so it's useful to know which bits are the responsibility of the council to maintain. So we're using geofencing here to enable that. So just to provide a little bit of a summary of what I've just shown here, So we started out in ArcGIS Survey123 for our public issue reporting. Survey123 was a great choice for this because not only is it an easy-to-understand survey-based interface, but it also gives us a lot of options for controlling how that survey is shared with the public. Then when we moved into the field, we used ArcGIS QuickCapture, and this was great for capturing more detailed information on the go. We created a very streamlined workflow that allows users to capture data very quickly while they're walking down the street, which is excellent. And then in Field Maps, we used the upcoming task capability to manage our work, keep track of our work orders, and make sure that our field workers have all of the information that they need while they're out in the field. So hopefully you've seen that by following these couple of recommendations, we've been able to extract a lot of value out of these mobile applications without too much effort. And so hopefully we've given you a bit of inspiration to get stuck in and try using the mobile apps for your own particular workflows. Now, we've mainly been talking about the big three apps, so Survey123, QuickCapture, and Field Maps, but there are other apps available within the ArcGIS system, including some more advanced and more specialized apps that are available as add-on licenses, such as these two right here. So Suite for ArcGIS provides much more advanced web and mobile editing capabilities with deep configuration using Arcade. The whole idea of Suite is that you can configure your app to follow your business logic, and that makes sure that your data is always correct at point of entry. If you want to learn more about Suite, there's a session back in this room this afternoon about advanced web editing that will cover Suite in more detail. And then there's also UNE for ArcGIS, and this is built on the same foundations as Suite, but this is more tied to viewing, querying, and editing utility network data on the web and on mobile. And it maintains this complex topology that's associated with that kind of data.
So what's next with the mobile apps? Everything we've shown you today is publicly accessible. So the Survey123 AI assistant that I showed, that is in beta, but it's ready for you to use in the web designer. The Field Maps task that Arthur showed has just become publicly available to use through the early adopter program, and that comes with a redesigned app interface. Survey123 also has some more AI assistants coming soon that you can try out by joining that early adopter program. So that includes extracting information from images and automatic audio transcription.